The budget will be delivered on July 23rd from 10 a.m. In the House of Assembly. As I said some time ago, the budget is being prepared at a time when every country in the world is having its own challenges, in Dominica included. We have not escaped the fiscal and economic challenges confronting the entire world. Well, we have seen our revenue dropped. We've seen the increased demands on government for various interventions. And we have maintained our social safety nets. We have not interrupted any of our social safety nets. And we continue to implement a number of very important projects. Now, within the region, you hear of governments cutting in salaries. In St. Lucia, there's a fiscal gap. The government has indicated that it has to close the fiscal gap. The route they're taking to close the fiscal gap is reducing on the wage bill. The wage bill is always the largest chunk of the recurrent expenditure of all governments. You seen in Barbados the termination of a number of public employees. Grenada has to go through an IMF program. So all of us are having our challenges in various forms. So the budget is being prepared in that context. And there's always a justification for either increasing taxation, existing taxation, or introducing new tax measures. But what we have done over the years is to try to minimize the impact on the taxpaying public in respect to a number of capital projects. And when you look at the West Coast Road and a number of projects that have been financed by way of grants, if you had to contract loans to implement this project, it would mean that your debt servicing would increase, and then therefore you would need to find additional funds to service those debts. Where do you find additional funds? From taxpayers and so forth. And if the taxpayers are saying to you that they're not in a position to pay more, can you really tax them more? And this is the point I've also made in respect to salary increases. There's nothing wrong with unions making a request for salary increases, but the question is, are we the Dominican people prepared to pay more to underwrite the increase in salaries at this time? Because at the end of the day, people believe that it is Minister Skerrit they're asking for money. It is the people. I am just the custodian of the people's resources. So you're not asking Minister Skerrit for the resources. You're asking the people of Dominica, and the people of Dominica can give only what the people of Dominica can afford. So we have to look at it in this context, but we also look at it in the global context, of the realities of the situation. So the budget has been prepared in taking all of these things into consideration. Also, in our consultation with the Dominican public and various stakeholders, there are some measures which we will present to the Parliament when we meet next week, which I'm sure the population will receive with a great welcome.
As it relates to the value-added tax, and we've heard the Dominica Hotel and Tourism Association issue a call for a reduction of some sort. Is that something that the government is willing to look at?
Well, the Hotel Association, the Hotel and Tourism Association, they've asked for some things to be done in respect to the value-added tax. One, they've asked for the removal of VAT on the service charge. Two, they've asked for the removal of VAT on food to staff and proprietors of the hotel. And three, they've asked for the removal of VAT on uniforms for staff. And in another case, I believe they would have asked for a reduction in the rate of taxation on accommodation, I believe. One of the things I've always stated is that the VAT replaced a number of taxes in the country. And that while we want to be responsive to the requests of various stakeholders, the government must take every request and consider the whole before we take a decision. You cannot take a decision without looking at the whole impact on the entire country. There maybe one or two of the requests the DHTA have asked for, which we can consider in the upcoming budget. Of course, we will continue to review the legislation. But I consider I can say now that one or two of the requests the DHTA will be taken on board, and that will be made reference. Reference will be made to that in the budget address delivered by myself as Minister of Finance. But we must always take things in consideration of the whole. You understand? Because when you make a cut, if somebody make a request and you take a decision to remove a particular tax or reduce it, you have to determine how much revenue you will lose by that action. You must not forget also that we have certain core expenditure which cannot be tampered with. Okay? So you now have to look at the rest of the budget and see where you're going to make some cuts to make up for that money you'll be losing. Okay? So there are a lot of nuances and issues that one has to consider before a final determination is made by the cabinet as to whether we take that measure or this measure, or we don't take any measure at all. Because you don't want to go and take a decision which might sound politically expedient, but which does not augur well for the health of the finances of the country. So people who come and say, well, we'll reduce VAT, or we will remove VAT completely, or we will abolish income tax. All of this may sound exciting and great, but the question is, what do you replace them with? Because you want to be losing a significant amount of revenue. What do you replace them with? So you know, putting the budget together is not dissimilar to you putting your own budget at home. You know, you have your mortgage, you have your car loan to pay, you have your children's school fees to pay. These are costs which you cannot defer. You cannot say, well, call the bank and say, well, look, can I start paying you next year and so on, or call the school principal and say, well, look, I cannot pay your children's school fees. These days, the school will hold your child's report card. You see? So these are things that you must meet. Now, you have to look at other issues that you can leave out. If you're drinking a carton of beer for the month, you have to drink one beer now. So things where you can cut that are necessary, you can cut them. But things where you have fixed costs, we have fixed costs for salaries. We have to maintain the hospital and provide medication, pharmaceuticals to the hospital. We have to maintain the roads. We have to service our debt. These are things we cannot defer. We cannot say, well, next year we'll do this, or in next 2 years we'll do this. When the loans have matured, you have to start paying. You know, and if you do not pay, you're in default. If you're in default, it is a bad reflection on the whole economy. And investors who believe that the government defaults on its loans will not want to come to business in the country. And people will not want to borrow you or lend you money because you have defaulted. Another thing we have to take into consideration, because some people have said that no country, no bank can seize Dominica. So people who have been there before in the Workers' Party believe that you can borrow money and don't pay because nobody can seize Dominica. But you are in a monetary union, and bad fiscal policies in one country can affect the entire monetary union. It can have an impact on the dollar. And when it has an impact on the way that we conduct our business in the region, it will have an impact on foreign investment. It will have an impact on existing investments in the country. You understand? So there are a number of implications if bad decisions are taken, or if decisions are taken for pure partisan political benefit of the party in office. And this has not been what we have done. We have always maintained a prudent and responsible approach to the management of the state finances. Notwithstanding the fact that it will be an election year, we will present a budget which the country can afford, not a budget to win any election, to win any votes. That is a budget which the country can afford.
Mr. Skerrit, one last question from me. We have seen the gas prices escalating. They're approaching $16 a gallon. Any efforts from government maybe to subsidize gas to some sort?
That's the challenge we have, you see. We import fuel. And with all the problems in the Middle East that these people are creating in Iraq and Syria and all these places, these people use this as an opportunity to increase the price of petroleum products. Now, the landed price in Dominica is what we have to deal with, because you only have $3 on a gallon of gas and $2.40 or thereabout on a gallon of diesel. That's all the government makes. The government doesn't go home with $17 or $16 you pay for a gallon. This is not the case. People think that the $16 goes to the government. Only $3 on gas and $2.40 or thereabout on diesel goes to the treasury. Okay? We have removed completely the excise tax on cooking gas. So nobody pays any tax whatsoever, customs service charge or nothing at all on cooking gas. So we had removed the customs service charge on petroleum products, or the petroleum products like diesel and gasoline. So that's the other area of it. It is something that we have looked at. It is something that we have discussed. But it is not something I believe at this time the country can afford. You know, I believe that there are other areas where we can give relief that may be more beneficial to the Dominican people. Because if we're going to cut this $3 to $1, you know, it's going to have an impact on the fiscal situation. And how do we address that particular situation? So we have been discussing this at length, and this is why we took a decision some years ago to remove the excise tax on all cooking gas, and to remove the customs service charge on diesel and gasoline. But it is a real challenge, because even for government itself, because government is one of the largest consumers of petroleum products. I mean, all the vehicles you have out there, you know, have to be moving across the country. You see it impacting on the cost of government doing business, because we are not exempted from any of the taxation that you, the citizens, have to pay. The government pays all its VAT, the government pays excise tax on vehicles, everything. So it's something we've been discussing. There are different sides of the issue that we're still discussing, and the discussion will continue. But and if possible, if we can give some relief, we will look at it, because it's a very concerning thing for us as a government.